Today we're going to be working on Chapter 12, Lesson 5, which is classifying quadrilaterals. If you remember from the previous lesson with polygons, we talked about quadrilaterals having four sides. We can classify them based on their sides, if they are congruent, if they are parallel, and if they have right angles. So congruent means the same, and parallel means run side by side, such as like that, without ever crossing each other. Okay, so let's look at example 1. Trina cut out polygon mats to use for her travel photos. Use the figures below to determine the missing attributes of each type of quadrilateral. So first of all, we have quadrilaterals, so we're going to classify them. Over to the left over here, you see that this is what we call a trapezoid. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral, four sides, with exactly blank pair of opposite sides parallel. So if you take a look, this and this are parallel. It means they run side by side, but they will never touch. These two, however, are not parallel because if I kept going and continuing them, they would eventually cross each other. So a trapezoid has one pair of opposite sides parallel. Okay, so they are their own group. Another type of quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Parallelograms are quadrilaterals with opposite sides congruent and blank. So if we take a look, these opposite sides are congruent. That means they are the same length, and they're also parallel. That means that they run side by side, but they do not cross each other. Okay. The next type of quadrilateral that is also a parallelogram is over here. It's a rectangle. And if you take a look at the rectangles have 1, 2, 3, 4 right angles. But the difference between a rectangle and a square that we're going to look at over here is that rectangles have 4 right angles and they have 2 pairs of parallel sides. However, they are not congruent. So you can see the top and the bottom are congruent to each other, but these two sides are shorter than the top and the bottom. So that's what makes that a rectangle. Squares, on the other hand, have 4 congruent sides, and they also have 4 right angles. So all sides are the same, and all angles measure the same as 90 degrees. The last type of parallelogram is called a rhombus. And if you take a look, rhombuses are they look similar to squares, but they're different because the one thing that makes them different is that they do not have right angles. It's almost like a square that has been slanted. So they are parallelograms with 4 sides congruent. But again, what makes a rhombus different than a square is that squares have 90-degree angles and rhombuses don't. So a square has all the attributes of a rectangle as well as a rhombus. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to the next page. Example 2 at the top says one side of the Realia building in Madrid, Spain is shown at the right. Describe the attributes of the quadrilateral and then classify it based on its attributes. So the first one is we're looking over here at this building right here. So we're looking at this building. It says the quadrilateral has opposite sides blank. So opposite sides mean what's across from them. So the opposite sides are congruent. I can tell that because the top and the bottom are the same and the two sides going up and down are the same. And it also has their opposite sides congruent and they are parallel, which means that they will never cross. So because they're both congruent and they're parallel, you can take a look that we have to go ahead and classify what it is. So if you were thinking of what it looks like, it is a rectangle. Okay. Down on here, we're going to go ahead and classify some more. Number 1, describe the attributes of the quadrilateral below. Then classify the quadrilateral based on its attributes. The opposite sides of the quadrilateral, so that across from each other, they are parallel. Or I'm sorry, they are congruent, not parallel. Congruent and parallel. Sorry, there were 2 lines. Congruent and parallel. And there are 4 right angles. So the quadrilateral then is a rectangle. This design over here below is made up of repeating quadrilaterals. We're going to describe the attributes of the quadrilateral, then classify it. So if you take a look, the quadrilateral has blank congruent sides. They all are the same, so it has 4 congruent sides. The opposite sides are indeed parallel to each other. This time is not 90-degree angles, so this is a rhombus. Up at the top here, it says describe the attributes of each quadrilateral, then classify it. So first thing, we have 2 parallel sides, and they also, opposite sides are congruent. It does not have 90-degree angles, so because of that, it makes it a rhombus. Next one. This one. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back to this. It's not a rhombus because take a look. So this was my fault. I'm sorry about that. A rhombus has 4 sides parallel, 4 sides congruent. And over here, if you take a look, a parallelogram has opposite sides. So a parallelogram looks similar to number 3. So we're going to change that from a rhombus to a parallelogram. Number 4, however, if you take a look, all sides are congruent. So we're going to say 4 congruent sides. And they are not 90 degrees. So again, the parallelogram that has 4 congruent sides without 90-degree angles makes it then a rhombus. Okay. Number 5 says circle the quadrilaterals that have all the attributes of a parallelogram. So again, I would use the chart on page 929 to help us. So if you look, everything that's below parallelogram has the attributes of it. So parallelograms are rectangles, squares, and rhombuses. So over here, we can circle all those: rectangle, squares, and rhombus. Trapezoids are different because, again, trapezoids look like this picture right here with only one pair of opposite parallel sides. The next one says circle all the quadrilaterals that have all the attributes of a rhombus. So rhombuses are connected only to squares. They are not with rectangles, you can see. So the only thing that is a rhombus is a parallelogram. It's a type of parallelogram, but it's a square. So we can circle parallelogram and we can circle squares. Okay. All right. So you can go ahead and get started on the homework page. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them to me. But otherwise, go ahead and you can work on page 933 and 934. I will tell you that for 933, you're probably going to have to do a couple answers, especially for number 1 and number 2, because they want you to describe it and name them. So you're going to describe number 1 by telling like about the sides and the angles, and then you're going to tell me what kind of quadrilateral that is, and same thing with number 2. Number 3 is just like what we did on this page, where you're going to be circling the quadrilaterals that have all the attributes of the rectangle. Then down here for number 4, you're going to have to name all of them. Same with 5, 6, and 7. So there might be more than one answer for 4 through 7. For number 8, you're just going to write a real world problem. So you're basically making up a story problem just like we did in class. Okay. Any questions, again, feel free to ask me. Thank you.